Hi, everybody. I'm here with Julie Sowash, who is Executive Director at Disability Solutions, and we're going to be talking about recruiter enablement from a very specific angle, which I'll come on to. But Julie, first off, give us a quick introduction to you and what you do.
Hey, Adam, thank you for having me on. I'm so excited to be on the YouTube channel officially. Julie Sowash, I'm the Executive Director of Disability Solutions. We've been around for about 13 years. We have helped over 70 companies build end-to-end strategy and implementation of results-based hiring and retention of people with disabilities. Some of the big brands you would know for us, PepsiCo, Frito-Lay, Bristol-Myers Squibb, and I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, great. Okay, so typically what we talk about on here is recruiter enablement, and it's a little bit kind of like mainstream on the talent acquisition type of subject, but I think there's two specific angles that I'd like to talk about with you. So the first is I'd like to talk about how should companies be thinking about making the role of a recruiter more inclusive for people with disabilities?
Yeah, you know what I love about this question is that when we are interviewing, when we're job seekers, right, we're always more comfortable when the person that we're facing is reflective of who we are. And so as we think about companies really making great strides in hiring people with disabilities, having that first face of the organization be a recruiter who also has a disability is fantastic. It also creates a whole new space of empathy and engagement for the candidate that they probably haven't had in oftentimes from what we experience the entirety of their job seeking history. And so that's really exciting. I like to pair that as to, one time I was a single parent, so I had a lot of empathy for people who were also single parents that I led. And so this is a really great thought about how do we get more people in the door? It's really to create an environment where recruiters with disabilities can be successful. So what does that look like? First of all, it has a lot to do with technology and making sure that our technology is YCAG 2.1 accessible. But what I want to focus on is that is the foundation level, right? The foundation is having technology that people with certain types of disabilities can use. Really, the next piece is about their experience as an employee, whether that means working from home, which is great for some people with disabilities like mine. I've worked from home for about 12 years. I couldn't go back to an office at this point. For some people, being on site is important, but really having that work flexibility is really huge for people with disabilities, especially when we have jobs like recruiting that can be done from anywhere. So I would say accessibility, making sure that we have flexibility and opportunity around how people work and where people work. And really the third is all about culture, creating a piece of their island in that company that feels like they can be themselves. And that's not just something that we say, it is something that dramatically changes and improves people's not just work experience, but their lives. And so being able to have well-trained TA, recruiter, HR leadership that knows how to better understand and manage talent with disabilities to maximize production, increase retention, but also, again, they're the first face that a lot of people see. And to be able to create that really safe and comfortable space goes so far. And so many times we're not thinking about that as leaders.
Absolutely. Wow. I mean, I could press stop on the recording already, and we've got like a whole load of learnings from you on this subject. So, I want to talk about it from the perspective of the candidate as well. So, what are the things that we should be doing to optimize the experience for candidates who have disabilities? And I'm conscious that disabilities come in so many different like types. So it's a potentially very you could write a very long book about this subject. But yeah, what are some of the most important things that employers need to be thinking about?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. When we started this work a long time ago, what we mainly heard and still actually do hear a lot is that we need to think about how do we accommodate workers after they're hired. How do we make sure that they have the adaptations, the adjustments, the accommodations, whatever word we're using, to make sure that they're successful on the job? What we found in the 12 or 13 years we've been at this, and the thousands of people that we've actually gotten hired at the companies that we work with, is that most accommodations need to happen before people even get in the door. It really is in that end-to-end TA experience, that life cycle, excuse me, of a job seeker. And that again, starts in how do we enable our recruiters? We want to make sure that the job seeker is having a good technical experience. So we start again at the basics, right? YCAG enabled, YCAG enforced. That's one. But then really when we get into all of the automations, the workflows, the data management techniques going into actually getting in front of that recruiter in the first place, that's where we see a lot of candidates, I would say the majority of candidates with disabilities, fall out due to the way that we build automations and workflows. And in the US, especially, the way that we have to define how a candidate is, or who a candidate is, excuse me, really makes a big difference. So we want to start with recruiter enablement that focuses on the process before they get to that recruiter. It should be inclusive, it should have accessibility, but it should be built for all types of people with disabilities. And I think, to your point, a lot of times companies think about, well, if it's accessible technically, then we've done our job. I'm a person with a disability, and I don't need a technically accessible site. I don't need a technically accessible experience, and that is going to be the majority of us. What I do need are an accommodations line that actually gets answered and responded to, which is almost never happens, I can tell you that. I need to make sure that I have flexibility in scheduling. I have multiple ways in which I can do that. Those type of things really make a big difference. And that way, when the job seeker is getting in front of that candidate or in front of that recruiter for the first time, they feel comfortable, right? So there's that piece that's like setting up to success to get to that recruiter in the first place. And then once we have the recruiter, what we want to do is normalize disability for them. We want to take away some of that big scary. And our experiences with people with disabilities are our experiences with people with disabilities. And so we want to help the recruiter to have a knowledge base about how to interact with people with different types of disabilities. We want to empower them to be able to put accommodations in place and understand what accommodations are available and have resources to plug those in when a job seeker does make that request, so that we don't start off with all of the jitters because the recruiter's uncomfortable, but also the job seeker is nervous. That really going to the experience and empowering your recruiters to be able to have an experience that both makes them more comfortable interacting and engaging with a variety of types of disabilities, but we also want to make sure that they have the tools that they need to actually execute on that and to provide them with that resource material. And lastly, I would say we want to make sure that we are doing repetitive education and measurement. So when we see some things are working, we need to step up those opportunities. When we see things aren't working for recruiters, we need to cut them out. We don't need busy work, right? We don't need any of that. And I think so much around disability has been paired as busy work. Nobody needs that. And so if me showing up as a job seeker with a disability makes your life harder as a recruiter, you don't want to engage with me. You don't want to hire me. That's because companies aren't providing those resources to quickly empower recruiters to be able to meet the needs of the job seeker in their own land. And that's really key, is how do we normalize? How do we operationalize? And one thing that we talk about a lot in just DEI in general is we have talk a great game about diversity and inclusion, right?
Yeah.
What companies fail to do is operationalize that. And that means it doesn't need to come from one person in one land far, far away in legal. It needs to be in the recruiter's hands at all time. And really, for us, and I'll wrap up because I'm quite a talker, we tend to think about, people with disabilities as a set aside. And really, people with disabilities are a quarter of the US population, 1 billion strong globally, and we come in all different varieties. So being a part of the overarching strategy will actually get you a lot further as a company versus just that one-off strategy. And that's really where recruiter and recruiter enablement becomes a critical piece of finally getting people with disabilities to work or back to work.
Well, yeah, I just learned a heck of a lot there, and I believe that I need to follow up with you on what is it we should be offering to recruiters from within Poetry, our new recruiter enablement workspace that is going to help them to understand, what they should be doing a lot more, especially in the recruitment operations and recruiter enablement teams. So I'd like to say thank you very much for joining me today. It's been a real privilege. I know that you're in high demand because it is Disability Awareness Week in the United States. Where can people find out more about disability solutions?
Disabilitytalent.org, or you can find me on all of the socials on Julie Sowash, Sowash. Thanks for having me on, Adam. I really appreciate it.
Wonderful. Great. See you soon.
See ya.